What's going on, everybody? This is Ken Yambo, the Culture Nerd writer and Bridging the Geekdoms co-host. We had quite a bit of news happen over the last. James Gunn has officially announced the first chapter of the DCU, and we're going to delve right into it here. We're going to do a inaugural episode of Ken's 10, which I will rank the 10 projects in terms of anticipation for James Gunn's new DCU. Coming in at number 10 for me will be the Creatures Commando project that was announced. It is an animated project that appears to focus on Amanda Waller, kind of creating a Black Ops team comprised of a lot of different monstrous characters. Apparently, Rick Flag Sr. is going to be involved within it. Something that became really exciting from this announcement was James Gunn's desire to have unity throughout multiple iterations of a character. So it's very possible that we're going to see characters from the animated side of things going straight into the live action side of things, and still being portrayed by the same actor, which I think is a really cool concept and really rounds out that continuity desire that Gunn and Safran seem to have established. So coming in number 10 will be Creatures Commando. Next up is number 9, and that'll be the movie The Authority. And when I first watched the video and kind of heard about this, I was curious that was this entirely necessary? It seems like it follows the same sort of tone and route as Peacemaker in a way, where heroes view the world as, for lack of a better term, shit, and they just take matters into their own hands. But what was explained to me, and if you watch the Culture Nerd podcast last night with Taylor and the rest of the gang, comes off as a mixture of The Boys meets the project is kind of failing to come to my mind at the moment, but the combination that was posed was really interesting to me, so I do think that that's something that will be interesting. It will be fascinating to see if the Authority face off against one of the main DC characters that we're used to, or if this is just more of a standalone passion project for Mr. Gunn and kind of follows route with what he's done with the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, and probably what he will follow with my next entry on the list, which is the Waller TV show. Now, this is interesting. I think this is set in between Peacemaker season 1 and 2, so with the announcement of the Waller show, we got already a kind of confirmation that we are getting a season 2 of Peacemaker, which appears to be in limbo to some fans, but considering that the second season was ordered, I'm not shocked at all that we will be getting season 2 of Peacemaker. So the Waller show is set in between season 1 and 2 of Peacemaker, and it will apparently incorporate some of the people that we met in Peacemaker, more specifically Team Peacemaker. I'm always for more Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, and I think this might be an indication that Amanda Waller and this iteration of Amanda Waller will be carrying over into James Gunn's DCU, although that hasn't been entirely confirmed. You can definitely read in between the lines that this is a character and a project that James Gunn has a lot of love for. And it'll be interesting to see just Amanda Waller's backstory, just her interactions with the larger DC universe kind of expanded upon in this show. So I hope that that's something that we get to see within the Waller TV series. And coming in at number 7 for me is Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. I know that it's based off of the recent Tom King iteration of the character, which portrayed it a little more jaded, as Mr. Gunn said himself, but I am interested, to say the least, on a different interpretation of Supergirl. We've obviously gotten the interpretation on the Arrowverse, and we're going to get Sasha Cal's interpretation of Supergirl in the upcoming Flash movie. But just from what I've heard in the announcement video, that this might be a little more focused on a darker iteration of Supergirl, obviously interests me. You know, you have the compare and contrast of how Superman was raised in America with a loving family versus this iteration of Supergirl, who was apparently not sent to any planet and was forced to grow up and watch a lot of her constituents die on a chunk of Krypton. So I think this is something that's interesting, and it obviously will somehow tie in with the Superman movie. So I think this is an interesting concept, but again, something that kind of falls under, okay, we could have maybe done another project on another cornerstone DC character, but nonetheless, I am excited for it, and I am intrigued by the concept of a darker Supergirl. So that's something that is definitely tantalizing, and I will definitely be watching to see what unfolds with that. Coming up next is going to be Booster Gold. Booster Gold is a character that I don't really have too much familiarity with. You always heard in the past couple years recently that fans have been clamoring for a project to be made for Booster Gold. When I got the premise of it, that it's a person in the future that's considered a loser, and that he comes back to present day with future technology to make him this sort of superheroic figure within society, definitely intrigued by it for sure. I think that's something that will resonate with the fans, and I think the premise of it is interesting enough that if they were able to land a great actor for the role, I do believe that this series would be one that would be considered a hit, and a lot of people would like to see Booster Gold's future in the DCU be expanded beyond this. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and just the social medias kind of typecast Chris Pratt into the role. And while I'm not against it, I think the vision for James Gunn's DCU will be relatively unknown younger actors in these roles. I do not believe that whoever will be casted as this role has not been mentioned by the fans yet. Although I do believe Chris Pratt would be a good interpretation of the character. That might be a little too head on the nose for James Gunn at the moment right now. So moving on up the list, we're going to go to my top 5, and rounding out my top 5 at number 5 is Paradise Lost. I am so intrigued by this project because it serves as a confirmation that, yes, we might probably be getting a new recasted Wonder Woman, but this is setting the groundwork for who Wonder Woman is, where does she come from, her heritage, and just describing it as a Game of Thrones sort of Westeros sort of vibe around it, just on Themyscira or Paradise Island with the Amazons, is going to be an exciting prospect. And I like that James Gunn akin it to Game of Thrones because he's trying to connect modern day audiences with the stuff that he's coming out with now. So I think, and we'll see that a lot more as we move up this list. So Paradise Island, number 5. Number 4 is going to be Swamp Thing. I personally watched a few episodes of the DC Universe interpretation of Swamp Thing, and obviously you see him a lot in the animated universes, and I'm really intrigued by this character. I think this project serves as a backdoor pilot, in a way, for the Justice League Dark to appear, who I think will appear before the Justice League. So I think having Swamp Thing as a dark horror film is something that's really intriguing. It depends on who the director is, but 2 names off the top of my list would be Guillermo del Toro and James Mangold are my top 2 choices to helm this project. So I think this project has a lot of potential and has a lot of potential to have greater ramifications surrounding the DCU. So I was definitely excited to hear that Swamp Thing will be getting his time to shine as well. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Superman Legacy. I am always for Superman projects. I think that the fact that he announced this earlier on and before even this year came, that fans were definitely inclined to think that this was going to be an announcement as part of his new DCU slate. I think this is going to be the tone setter moving forward. And I hope that they borrow a lot of elements from the Tomorrowverse. And for those who don't know who the Tomorrowverse is the new animated universe that's currently in the mainstream animated DC universe. And it's a follow-up to the previous universe, which ended with Apocalypse War, if I'm not mistaken. So it's kind of a reset. And I think the Superman movie, it kind of follows in route where you're going to be introduced to Clark. You're going to see him be Supermaning for a little bit, and he's struggling to balance his Kryptonian side with his human upbringing. So I think this is something that's intriguing. Obviously, it depends on stories and the way the character's interpreted from the new actor that they're obviously going to be placing into the role. But I am always open-minded to, especially for a Superman movie, always open-minded to seeing new things. So it's going to be exciting to see this universe be baptized by this specific movie. So I think it's a very important movie. I don't think it's going to be tonally similar to what we saw in Man of Steel. I think it probably will be the complete opposite of it, bright with colors and everything. And actually recently on Twitter, I just saw Rob sent it to me where he is now, James Gunn posted a poll where it's going to be Trunks versus no Trunks. While I'm personally on the side of no Trunks, I can see how we're going back to the classical roots of this character. So I could see Trunks kind of being a thing, although that's something that I believe personally is outdated. I'm definitely excited for this project. James Gunn is a great writer, and he's made it a point of emphasis on multiple occasions to stress that storytelling is king. Storytelling is what's going to drive this universe forward. So I'm really excited for this project, and I can't wait to see who they cast. I could see it following the same route of casting relative nobodies for the main parts, but maybe a seasoned veteran actor that you haven't seen in a while for some of the more supporting role actors. The most important factor of this movie will hinge on A, who the villain is, and B, who is portraying that main villain. And I think that will be the most important part for Superman Legacy. The second project on my list that has the most excitement for me, at least on the TV side of things, is Lanterns. This iteration of Lanterns will focus on Hal Jordan and John Stewart's iterations of the characters, and it was described as being a true detective just in space. This is something, I think this is a retooled version of the previous Green Lantern show that we were supposed to be given that focused on multiple iterations of the characters. But I think this is really the route to go. I think going with Hal and John on a space mission as space cops is exciting and is something that the fans have been clamoring for a while. So I think this is a project that will definitely be on I feel like will be on the top of most people's list in terms of anticipation. And just the way it was described, I think them discovering a greater threat that will have a greater impact on the DCU is something that's intriguing. I think that for my personal sake, I think if I had to guess, I think they will discover a threat that will end up becoming the first threat for this new universe, this new overarching villain. So whether that's Sinestro, whether that's somebody else entirely, I think it's really cool that we're getting a Lantern show and that we're getting it focused on the two main lanterns from the DC comic continuity. And finally, number one is going to be The Brave and the Bold. This is great. This surprised me, honestly, but getting a father-son movie with Bruce and Damian is something that delves deep into the comic book routes, but more recently, as I've articulated before, I recently went through an animated universe binge, and the central focus of the DCAU, the main DCAU from, I believe, 2014 all the way up until Apocalypse War, where it began with Justice League Flashpoint and then ended with Justice League Apocalypse War. The center, I felt like, was the focus on the relationship between Damian and Bruce, and I think that's something that has never been done before on screen. We're finally getting a Robin, although I know that a lot of people are unhappy that we're kind of jumping some Robins and getting straight to Damian, but having a season Nightwing already and not even a season Nightwing, but just having a Nightwing in existence and the possibility of Batgirl and the rest of the Bat family showing up is really intriguing to me, and I think this was the best decision for the DCU's Batman moving forward. I think just having Damian as a factor in this universe is going to be something really interesting, and we're going to see a dynamic that Batman really hasn't had in his whole history on cinema. So really excited for that. Really excited for a lot of the projects that were announced by Mr. Gunn, and I hope that you guys are sharing the same amount of excitement that I am. Just please stay tuned to the Cultured Nerd for the latest news regarding James Gunn's DCU. And please stay tuned in for me, Rob's, Colton's reactions towards this and any other new announcements that we have. It's an exciting time for DC fans, and I think it's definitely comes with its baggage as we have to, kind of say goodbye and sing our farewell to the Snyderverse and things of that nature. But the possibilities are open, and we're finally getting an interconnected DC universe, which is something that I feel like is long overdue. I can't wait to share my excitement with everybody, and I can't wait for these projects to get off the ground and start rolling. I had a blast doing this, and I can't wait to see you guys next time. Until then, so long.